You know, sometimes life tricks you into thinking you've finally found your place. That's how it felt back then. I had my brother, my fiancée, and a future that looked so bright it almost scared me. My brother and I, we weren't just siblings. We were best friends, partners in crime. Growing up, we'd share everything: clothes, secrets, even the same beat-up pair of headphones when we couldn't afford another set. So when I got engaged, it felt natural to imagine him standing right there beside me as my best man. I trusted him with everything. And then there was her, my fiancée. She was more than just the woman I loved. She was my anchor, the one who could quiet the storm in my head with just a smile. And her family, well, they welcomed me in like I was already one of them. That part was almost surreal. Dinners at their house were like stepping into another world. The table always set perfectly, laughter spilling across the room, her father telling stories about his younger years, and her mother slipping me extra servings like I was her own son. For a guy like me, who came from a family that never had much, it felt like I'd stumbled into a dream I didn't quite deserve. I can still remember one Sunday dinner in particular. The smell of roasted chicken filling the house, my fiancé's younger sister showing me some sketch she'd been working on, her dad clapping me on the back and saying, "You're good for her. You're good for all of us." I swear in that moment, I thought I'd made it. That this was it. My forever. Even my brother seemed happy for me then. He'd joke around with her family, fit right into the rhythm like he'd been part of it all along. I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? He was my brother. He was supposed to be on my side, supposed to share in the joy. Looking back now, I almost envy the man I was in those moments. Naive, but blissfully unaware. There was no suspicion, no bitterness, no shadow of what was coming. Just trust. Just love. Just hope that if I close my eyes, I can still hear the echo of those dinners, the clinking of cutlery, the bursts of laughter, the soft way she would squeeze my hand under the table. And I wonder, if I had known what was waiting down the line, would I have held on to those moments tighter? Or would it have broken me sooner? Back then, I didn't know the storm was already forming just beyond the horizon. I thought life was steady. I thought my world was unshakable. But that's the thing about storms, they don't send warnings. They just hit. That it's funny how the smallest things, the ones you barely notice at the time, later stick out in your memory like flashing warning signs. Looking back, I can see it now, the little cracks in what I thought was an unshakable bond with my brother. But at the time, I brushed them off. I wanted to believe we were solid. I wanted to believe nothing could touch us. That IT started with offhand comments. The kind that sound like jokes, but carry a sharp edge if you listen closely. Like when her dad praised me for how hard I worked, my brother smirked and said, "Yeah, well, some of us didn't have to charm our way into the rich house to get recognition." Everyone laughed, and I laughed too, but inside it stung. Still, I told myself, he's just kidding. Don't make it a big deal. Then there were the silences. Awkward ones. Her family would go on and on about how much they admired me, my work ethic, the way I treated their daughter, and I'd catch my brother staring at his plate, his fork, scraping a little too hard against the porcelain. No words, no smile. Just that quiet weight in the room. I'd glance at him, trying to meet his eyes, but he'd always look away. Again, I told myself it was nothing. That I remember one night in particular, her mom brought out a bottle of wine, expensive stuff, and poured everyone a glass. She raised her glass toward me and said, "You know, we couldn't have asked for a better match for our daughter." My chest swelled with pride, and I looked over at my brother expecting him to share the moment. Instead, he muttered under his breath, "Guess money really does buy happiness." Nobody else caught it, but I did. It burned, and yet I let it slide. Every time. Because that's what you do when it's family, right? You excuse it. You say he's tired. He didn't mean it. He's just going through a rough patch. I kept convincing myself his snide remarks weren't a reflection of how he really felt. But deep down, deep down, I think I knew. I think some part of me felt the shift. The air between us wasn't the same anymore. What used to be easy, banter started carrying undertones. What used to be brotherly teasing began to feel like envy. Still, I ignored it. I told myself I was overthinking. Because at that point, the thought that my own brother could want what I had, it was unthinkable. He was supposed to be happy for me. He was supposed to be proud. And maybe that's the cruelest part. How blind I let myself be. How I smiled. Through those cracks, not realizing they were the first signs of something that would shatter everything. There are moments in life when the ground shifts beneath your feet, and you realize you've been walking blindfolded the whole time. That's exactly what it felt like when the truth about my brother began to unravel. That it didn't happen all at once. Betrayal rarely does. It's more like water dripping through the ceiling, subtle at first, almost invisible, until one day, the whole roof caves in. I started noticing how often my brother was around. At first, I thought it was sweet. He'd show up at her parents' house when I was busy at work, offering to help with small errands, fix a squeaky door hinge, carry groceries inside. You know, normal, helpful stuff. And I remember thinking, that's my brother. Always willing to help. Always part of the family. I was proud of him. I was proud of how well he fit in, but then it got strange. Her mom would casually mention, "Oh, your brother was here earlier, such a thoughtful young man." Or her dad would chuckle about some story my brother had told him. Stories that painted me in an unflattering light. Little exaggerations. Harmless jokes, maybe, but ones that made me look irresponsible, careless, less than I really was. At first, I laughed it off. That's just his sense of humor, I told myself. But over time, the jokes became narratives, and the narratives started sticking. I could feel it in the way her family looked at me, like a small seed of doubt had been planted and was slowly growing roots. Then came the night that changed everything. I had stopped by her parents' house unexpectedly, just to drop something off, nothing special. But when I walked in, the atmosphere was different. My brother was sitting there at the dining table, talking to her dad in a low, serious voice. They both went silent when they saw me. My fiancée avoided my eyes, fiddling with her hands. That's when the pit formed in my stomach. That gnawing, ugly instinct that something wasn't right. Later that night, she confessed in pieces. My brother had been talking to her, really talking to her, about me. About how maybe I wasn't ready for marriage. About how I wasn't stable enough financially. About how I might just be after her family's money. And the worst part? He said it all like he was protecting her. Like the concerned brother-in-law, stepping in to open her eyes. That I remember sitting there, staring at her, my ears ringing. My own brother. The one I would have trusted with my life. Poisoning the one person I loved the most against me. I wanted to believe she wouldn't fall for it. I wanted to believe love was stronger than lies. But when she said, "I don't know if I can trust you the way I thought I could," it felt like the knife went in and twisted. That was the night the betrayal wasn't just suspicion. It was real. It was alive. And it was tearing my world apart. There are breakups, and then there are implosions. What happened between me and her? It wasn't a clean cut. It wasn't even a fight. It was more like watching someone slowly slip away while you're standing right there, powerless to stop it. At first, I tried to fix things. I sat with her in her parents' living room, my hands gripping hers, my voice shaking as I swore I wasn't who my brother made me out to be. I told her about our dreams, about the future we'd mapped out together. I begged her to remember all the nights we spent talking about names for our kids, the trips we wanted to take, the way she used to tell me I made her feel safe. But every word I said seemed to bounce off a wall that wasn't there before. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked at me differently, with doubt, with hesitation. It was like the love was still there, but poisoned, tainted by this new narrative my brother had been whispering in her ear. And I'll tell you the truth, that's worse than anger. At least anger means there's still fire. Doubt. Doubt is cold. The day she ended it, the air was heavy with silence. I remember the faint hum of the ceiling fan above us, the smell of her perfume, sweet but suffocating in that moment. She said, "I just don't think I can do this anymore. I need someone I can fully trust." And just like that, the floor gave out beneath me. I walked out of that house in a daze. The sun was setting, but it felt like the world had gone dark. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably my brother, probably pretending to check in on me. But I couldn't bring myself to look. I drove aimlessly that night, the city lights blurring through the windshield, my hands numb on the steering wheel. It was like I was floating outside my own life, watching it collapse from a distance. And then came the fallout, the ripple effect. Her family, once so warm and welcoming, grew cold. Invitations stopped. Calls stopped. Even casual smiles turned into polite nods. It was as if I had been erased, replaced, written out of a story I thought I belonged in forever. And my brother? He didn't even try to hide his new role. I'd hear whispers about him being over there, filling the space I left behind. Losing her was one thing. Losing her family, people who had become like a second home, was another. But realizing it was all orchestrated by the one person who was supposed to have my back, that's the kind of pain that sinks into your bones and stays there. That I'd always believed family was unbreakable. But in that moment, staring at my phone in the dark of my empty apartment, I realized my brother had managed to do what no outsider ever could. He'd burned down the bridge between us, and I was left stranded in the ashes. Time has a strange way of stretching and collapsing when you're grieving something that isn't supposed to be gone. The first few months after the breakup felt endless. Days bled into nights, nights into mornings, and every single one carried that same heavy ache in my chest. I'd wake up with her name in my head, only to remember she wasn't mine anymore. I'd scroll past pictures of my brother on social media, smiling, laughing, sometimes with people I used to call family, and it felt like I was watching a thief parade around with stolen treasures. Eventually, I stopped looking. I deleted apps, avoided gatherings, kept my head down. Silence became my shield. I cut my brother out completely. No calls, no texts, no explanations. He didn't chase me either, which almost hurt more. A part of me wanted him to reach out, to admit what he did, to beg for forgiveness. But nothing came. Just silence. 5 years. That's how long the distance stretched. 5 years of birthdays I didn't attend, family dinners I skipped, and awkward questions from relatives who wondered why the inseparable brothers weren't speaking anymore. I never gave an answer. How could I? How do you explain that your own brother poisoned the love of your life and took her family as his prize? In those years, I rebuilt myself piece by piece. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into long hours, projects, anything that kept my mind occupied. I made new friends, but I kept them at arm's length. Trust didn't come easily anymore. Whenever someone got too close, a quiet voice whispered, "Careful. People change. People betray." But it wasn't all darkness. There were small glimmers. 2. Long walks on rainy nights, where the sound of raindrops on pavement felt like the world washing itself clean. Quiet mornings with coffee, when the light broke through the blinds just right and reminded me life still had beauty in it. I wasn't healed, not completely, but I wasn't broken the same way anymore either. And yet, even after 5 years, the scar remained. Not just from losing her, but from losing him. I used to dream about the day we'd sit down, face to face, and finally clear the air. I wanted closure. I wanted to know why. But every year that passed, that conversation felt further away, like a ship drifting off into the horizon, until the phone rang one afternoon. A number I knew by heart. A voice on the other end, shaky and raw. "It's Dad. He's gone." Just like that, the silence I had built around myself cracked wide open. And I knew, whether I was ready or not, I'd have to face him again. Grief has a way of finding you when you least expect it. I remember the exact moment the call came. I was at my desk, a stack of unfinished work in front of me, when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my stomach twist. My cousin. Not someone who usually called out of the blue. I picked up, and before she even finished the sentence, I knew. "It's your dad. He's gone." The words rang in my ears, hollow and heavy. My first reaction wasn't tears, it was silence. The kind that presses down on your chest until you can barely breathe. My dad and I had our differences, sure, but he was still my dad. He was the man who taught me how to tie a tie before prom, who cheered from the stands even when I was the worst player on the team, who slipped me a 20 when he knew I was struggling but too proud to ask. And now he was gone. Just like that. But grief wasn't the only weight pressing down on me, because I knew what came next. A funeral, family, and him. My brother. For 5 years, I had managed to avoid him, building a life where he didn't exist. But funerals don't ask for your permission. They demand presence. They demand family standing together, no matter how fractured. And the thought of seeing him again, of being in the same room, breathing the same air, made my hands tremble. I sat there, phone still in my hand, staring at nothing. Memories of my dad flickered through my head. Him flipping pancakes on Saturday mornings, him falling asleep in his recliner with the TV still on, him shaking his head at me and my brother when we argued over stupid things. And then, the bitterness crept in. Because what would Dad think if he knew how far apart his sons had drifted? Would he blame me? Would he blame him? Or would he just want us to stand side by side one more time? That night, I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt too quiet, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, imagining the moment I'd see my brother again. Would he smirk like nothing happened? Would he pretend we were still family, still okay? Or would he avoid my eyes the way he used to when he knew I was catching on to his lies? I dreaded it, not just because of the anger, but because of the uncertainty. Because part of me, the part one hated, still wanted answers. Still wanted to know if he ever regretted what he did, or if he'd stolen my life without a second thought. The call I dreaded wasn't just about losing my dad. It was about the collision course it set in motion. A funeral that would force me to stand in the ruins of my family, shoulder to shoulder with the man who burned it down. The morning of the funeral, the air felt heavier than usual, as if even the sky knew what kind of day it was. I stood in front of the mirror, straightening my black tie, and for a brief moment I felt like a little kid again, fumbling with the knot while Dad leaned over to fix it. That memory hit harder than I expected. My hands froze, and I had to take a deep breath just to steady myself. Walking into the church was like stepping into a cloud of whispers. The smell of lilies, sweet, overwhelming, mixed with the faint scent of old wood and candle wax. Relatives I hadn't seen in years greeted me with quiet nods, sympathetic smiles. Their voices were hushed, but I could feel the weight of their eyes, the curiosity beneath the condolences. Everyone knew. Families talk. Secrets leak. And I knew some of them were wondering how I'd handle being under the same roof as my brother. And then I saw him that he was standing near the front, talking to an aunt, his suit pressed a little too perfectly, his face carefully arranged into something between sorrow and composure. For a split second, my chest tightened, like my body remembered all the years we'd been close, before everything went wrong. But just as quickly, the memory soured. My hands clenched at my sides, and I forced myself to look away that we didn't speak. Not then. Just a glance, a flash of recognition, a flicker of something unspoken, and then the silence swallowed us both. The service began. The priest's voice echoed through the hall, low and steady, as he spoke about Dad's life. I stared at the coffin, polished wood glinting under the soft light, and all I could think about was how final it looked. How heavy. My throat tightened, but I refused to cry. Not here, not in front of him. Halfway through, I felt it. A shift in the room. Hey, presence. I turned my head, and there they were, my ex-fiancée and her family, slipping quietly into the back row. My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. But no, it was them. Her father, still tall and sharp-eyed. Her mother, clutching a handkerchief. And her, standing smaller than I remembered, but unmistakable. The air seemed to thicken around me. My chest burned, my thoughts scrambled. 5 years of silence. And here they were, at my father's funeral of all places that I didn't look at my brother right away. I couldn't. But when I finally did, I saw it. The freeze. His body stiffening. His smile faltering mid-sentence, his face draining of color like a man who'd just seen a ghost. For the first time in years, his mask cracked, and I sat there, torn between grief for my dad and a strange, quiet vindication. Because in that moment, he wasn't in control anymore. Not in front of them. Not in front of me. The funeral had just become more than a goodbye to my father. It had become a stage for the reckoning I never thought I'd witness. It's strange how a single moment can stretch so long that it feels like time itself forgets how to move. That's exactly what happened when my brother saw them, my ex-fiancée, and her family, slipping into the funeral that I didn't need to hear his thoughts. His body said it all. 1 second, he was composed, chatting politely, playing the grieving son. The next, his whole frame went rigid. His hands, steady a moment before, started to tremble. He adjusted his tie once, twice, then dropped his hand quickly when he realized he was giving himself away. His face drained of color, his lips parted like he wanted to speak but couldn't. And me? I just watched. For years, I had replayed the betrayal in my mind, imagined confrontations where I'd finally get the upper hand. But now, seeing him freeze, seeing the lies and confidence crumble in real time, there was no satisfaction. Just a quiet heaviness, like watching someone choke on their own poison. The room seemed to notice, too. The murmurs died down, and I could feel eyes darting between him, me, and them. My brother tried to recover, straightened his back, forced a smile, but it was too late. The mask was off that I glanced toward her family. Her father sat tall, his jaw clenched tight, eyes fixed on the front of the church. Her mother's gaze flickered, caught between grief for my dad and a complicated ache I couldn't quite name. And she didn't look at me. Not once. Her eyes stayed low, fixed on the floor, as though the weight of everything was too much to carry in that moment. And then my brother's eyes met mine. It was like staring into a mirror warped with guilt. His usual smugness, the quiet arrogance he carried so well, it wasn't there. Instead, his eyes begged. For forgiveness? For mercy? For me not to expose him right there in front of everyone. I don't know. But what I do know is that, for the first time in years, he was the one cornered that I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. My silence was louder than anything I could have spoken. The service went on, the priest's voice echoing off the walls, but my focus never left that tension hanging between us. It was as if my father's coffin was the great equalizer, reminding both of us that no matter how far apart we had drifted, we were still sons of the same man. And in that sacred, grief-filled space, the truth finally showed on his face. The freeze wasn't just fear of being caught. It was recognition. Recognition that the empire he built on betrayal had cracks, and the ghosts of what he'd stolen had come back to haunt him, in the one place he couldn't run. The thing about funerals is that they demand silence. But sometimes, silence says more than any words ever could. After the service ended, people began filing out of the church, their footsteps soft against the stone floor. Some lingered by the coffin, touching it gently, whispering goodbyes. I stayed seated for a moment, not ready to face the swarm of relatives with their rehearsed condolences. I could feel him watching me, my brother. The weight of his stare, pressed against the side of my face. Finally, I stood. And when I did, so did he. For the first time in 5 years, we stood face to face. No crowd between us, no distractions, just two brothers standing in the shadow of our father's coffin. I thought I'd explode. Thought I'd yell, demand answers, throw years of bottled-up rage in his face. But when the moment came, none of that happened. Instead, I just looked at him, really looked, at the man I once called my best friend, at the man who tore my life apart with whispers and lies. And he looked back at me. His lips parted, like he wanted to say something, but no words came. Just the flicker of guilt in his eyes. Regret? Maybe. Shame? Definitely. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. There was no apology. No excuses. Just that heavy silence, thick enough to choke on. My heart hammered in my chest, my hands curling into fists at my sides. I wanted him to feel every ounce of the weight I carried. And judging by the way his gaze faltered, he did. Behind him, I caught sight of them, her family. Her father, stiff and unreadable. Her mother, eyes red, watching quietly. And she still couldn't bring herself to look at me. That hurt more than I expected, like a wound I thought had scarred over being ripped open all over again. Silence stretched on, and it became clear. This was our confrontation. Not a storm of words or fists, but the undeniable truth reflected in each other's eyes. He knew what he did. I knew what he did. And for the first time, there was no hiding, no pretending. Eventually, I stepped past him. I didn't shove him, didn't spit venom his way. I just walked by, my shoulder brushing his ever so slightly. That single motion carried more weight than anything I could have said. And as I walked toward the doors of the church, I heard him exhale, a shaky, broken sound. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. But it was something. A reminder that sometimes the loudest confrontations happen without a single word. Funerals have a way of forcing you to sit with yourself. When the crowd thins out, when the last hymn fades, when the flowers are carried away and the coffin disappears into the ground, you're left with nothing but the weight of memory. That I stood outside the church that day, the cool air brushing against my face, and for the first time in years, I felt strangely lighter. Not happy, not at peace exactly, but lighter. My dad was gone, and that grief was real. But in some twisted way, his funeral had forced me to face something I'd been running from for too long. For 5 years, I carried the anger like armor. I let betrayal shape me, define me, harden me. I told myself I'd never forgive my brother, never even look him in the eye again. And yet, there we were, standing across from each other, saying nothing, but saying everything. That silence between us wasn't closure, but it was enough for me to realize I didn't need his apology anymore. I didn't need his validation or even his guilt, because here's the truth. Sometimes closure isn't about fixing what broke. Sometimes closure is just accepting that it did break and learning how to live beyond it. That I thought about her, too, my ex-fiancée. About how she couldn't look at me, how her silence stung more than I wanted to admit. But even that felt different now. Less like a wound, more like a scar. We were two people who once loved each other, caught in the crossfire of someone else's choices. Maybe she regretted it. Maybe she didn't. Either way, it wasn't mine to carry anymore. Yes, I walked away from the church. I caught one last glimpse of my brother. He stood there, shoulders hunched, staring at the ground like a man drowning in his own mistakes. For a moment, I almost wanted to reach out. Almost. But then I realized that wasn't my burden either. His choices were his own. His ghosts would follow him, not me. And so I let go. Not in some dramatic, cinematic way. Just quietly. With each step I took away from that church, away from the coffin, away from the past, I felt the weight lift. My father was gone, my brother was still lost, but me? I was still here, still breathing, still moving forward. Closure didn't come with a confrontation. It didn't come with revenge. It came with acceptance. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.